Back to the program. With me now, our panel, former Chief of Staff to John Howard, Graham Morris from Barton Deakin Government Relations, and from the Sky News Centre, we've got Labor Alliance strategist from Campaigns and Communications, Bruce Hawker. Bruce, I want to start with you. Many questions remain around this Australia Day protest. Why not? Why didn't the government just say, OK, let's have an investigation, ask the AFP to do it, and be done with it? And that way they wouldn't give the opposition as much mileage as they've gained on this.
Well, I heard George Brandis talking, and he's tried to sound serious and sonorous and like an independent QC. At the end of the day, though, I think he ended up sounding like something caught between Alan Jones and Dennis Denuto. He really didn't have anything to say about offences that could have been committed. He really wanted to start talking about the vibe, and I think that was where he fell really short. There's no suggestion seriously that a crime is being committed here by the former press secretary, and I think that's the beginning and the end of it. I mean, the opposition can spend a lot of time, if they like, calling on the AFP to investigate what they hope is a crime, but at the end of the day, the AFP says, well, there is no crime, and we're not going to spend precious time and resources doing the opposition's work for it.
Graham, the AFP did issue a statement today saying a criminal act has not been identified. Why not let the AFP make that judgment and move on?
Because the federal police will be having an inquiry, no matter what that press release said. There is no way known the federal police can let this go. They have to have a look at the whole action of this thing and say, how do we avoid this happening again? How was it that this wasn't advanced properly by the Prime Ministerial staff? Who did the young staffer tell in authority before he made the phone call? What would have happened if the trade union woman had sent in the trade union thugs instead of the Indigenous brothers and sisters? And how was it? Is it a fact? I get a lot of time for the federal police, but is it a fact that some of the federal police are watching too much of The Bodyguard and Kevin Costner and picking up poor defenceless women and throwing them in the car if they get into trouble? There are a lot of things here that will be looked at, whether or not it's a formal inquiry or just one, how do we avoid it happening again, who knows. But the idea that this stops now and everyone says, oh, well, that was fun, that's just plain silly.
Bruce, at the very least, there are political questions to be asked here as to why did it take almost a day for the Prime Minister to be notified by her staff that one of the media advisors had passed on the information?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's answered that, actually. She said that she was unaware of anything. There was an investigation conducted within her own office by two senior advisors who established that Tony Hodges had, in fact, made a phone call to the trade union official. When the Prime Minister found out about that, the action was swift. Hodges was no longer a member of her staff. That was the appropriate thing to do. Everything else since then has been an attempt by the opposition to beat it up. I can imagine Tony Abbott on the weekend picking up the phone to George Brandis and saying, George, there must be an offence here. There must be something we can do. There must be a bylaw in the ACT that we can pick up on, that we can keep dragging this thing out over. That's really what they're doing at the moment. They're just trying to breathe life into something. What happened was a young staffer did the wrong thing and he paid a very high price for it. I think we'll find that this is really the beginning and the end of the story, despite the excitement of the opposition over the issue.
Well, I actually think it shows a culture, a sort of a tot culture in the Prime Ministerial office that's terrified of Tony. Somehow or other, everyone is sort of terrified of Tony Abbott. I also think that the whole thing has damaged any sort of move for constitutional change for the Indigenous brothers and sisters, and I think that's that. This was not a good episode, not a good look for the Prime Minister all around the world. And I do think, Bruce, that people ought to be having a serious look at this. And are there any federal laws broken? Well, probably not. But I tell you what, if you and I wanted to park where some of the cars are today, that our Aboriginal people are on the lawns of Parliament House, you and I would get a fine the first day, we get a bigger fine the second day, and the cars would towed away the third day. They're still there.
Well,
I think
sure. And
Bruce,
just on that, I think I'd like to think that they actually have a much more serious issue to pursue than Graham and me sitting on the front lawns of Parliament House. This is a protest which has really existed for something like 40 years, and they actually, whether it's agreed upon by everyone across Australia believe that they have a very serious issue.
All right, Bruce, I want to look at the Galaxy poll. Labor's numbers are up 5 points. Kevin Rudd in front as the preferred Labor leader, but not with the Labor voters. Julia Gillard still ahead on that. Who are these numbers good for?
Oh, well, they're good for Labor. They're a significant improvement since the last Galaxy poll, and they reflect another movement that way by the Roy Morgan poll the other day. We're still looking for a poll figure with a 4 in front of it, but we're getting a bit closer than we were before. So that's good for Labor. I think there's always going to be speculation about Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, and of course, whenever you have a poll like that, there's going to be excitement on the part of those who conducted the poll and commissioned it to make sure that the issue keeps playing out there. So I wouldn't read too much into any of this at the moment. Labor's still got a long way to go. No one on the Labor side is in any doubt about that. We've got to get quite a number of points before we can say we're up there with the opposition. But it's a good start to the year, notwithstanding the unhappy events of the last couple of days in Canberra.
How will the Queensland campaign play into all of this, the sensitivities with the leadership, the tensions there?
Well, people will make of it what they will, and some people will try to have a bit of fun with it. State elections, as I've said ad nauseum, are overwhelmingly based on state issues, and the outcomes tend to be state based. Sometimes federal issues leach into state campaigns, not so much state issues leaching into federal campaigns. I think this is a campaign which will be run largely on state lines, and Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard are doing the right thing by trying to support Anna Bligh in a time of real difficulty for Labor in Queensland.
And even though the problems the government has had, it's still climbed 5%, still well behind, but is that a worry at all to the coalition?
Well, I think Labor would still come third in a two-horse race. But I thought the interesting thing about the poll was that without trying at all, Bill Shorten gets 14% support in the leadership thing. If the Prime Minister was to be hit by a bus and you give her support to Bill Shorten, then Bill Shorten versus Kevin Rudd becomes a very interesting proposition for the Labor Party. And as far as Queensland goes, it'll be sort of Kevin, please come and help us, Labor Party. Julia, please come to the launch and then go to Tasmania, Singapore or China.
But just on the coalition's polling, that's a 5-point jump for Labor. If that continued, if they consolidated...
But that's before all the Australia Day stuff. Let's have a look at what the polls say tomorrow. Okay. That will take into account some of this kerfuffle and this mess that the Labor Party's got itself into at the start of the year.
Well, we'll certainly do that news poll out tomorrow, and as always, tomorrow morning on Sky News, Martin O'Shannessy will be our guest. But for now, Graham Morris and Bruce Hawker, gentlemen, good to see you both. Appreciate it. Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
And that's all for PM Agenda. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next time.
How are you going there, honey? Did you read the instructions?